Can you hear me, Jen?
I can, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you guys put the agenda and presentation in the chat, please? Hello, Miss Luella. Hello, Miss Valerie Cook-Henry, Miss Brown, Mr. Wright, Dr. B. Coates, Mr. Callahan, Mr. Kaufman, and Mr. Cupp. Thank you for being here. We will get started at 6:33. And I converted for military time just for you, Mr. Cupp.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Ms. Cook-Henry.
Good evening.
I know, didn't it go fast? It did. Should be 14 before we know it. Oh, that. Just
Miss Valerie in your background. And happy birthday to the 14-year-old.
Good evening.
Good evening. Since the recording is on, I would suggest that everyone mutes themselves so that we don't hear the background.
Thank you, Mr. B, Dr. B. Coates. Thank you for putting it in the chat.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Ms. Richardson. Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday.
Good evening.
Good evening. Today is Tuesday, June 14th, and this is our budget meeting. This will be the last meeting before we take it, hopefully, last meeting before we take action on our budget. We will see if our legislators get the budget done before the end of the month. So maybe if they don't, we consider having a special budget meeting the last day of the month to give us as much time. I believe in the past we've done that rather than guessing. But hopefully our legislators are working. So now I turn the floor over to Mr. Cuff and Mr. Kaufman to lead us through our presentation. The presentation and agenda are in the chat.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Hoff. So, since May 12th, there hasn't been much change. I think Ms. Hoff kind of alluded to that and what's going on in Harrisburg. So what we have this evening is a recap, and I'm not going to go into the detail that we went to last time because it's the same presentation, less a couple slides, and we added one slide at the end, which is information that we'll need going forward. So I'm going to start in, here we bring this up here and share.
Hello, Ms. Boykins and Ms. Ivory. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Okay. Alrighty. So I'm gonna, as everyone knows, in our budgeting process, there is our total revenues minus our expenditures equals our budget gap. And we're gonna go through the process of identifying our revenues, identifying our expenditures, and see where our budget gap stands. And again, this is going to be a recap of what we went through on May the 12th. So you'll see here, these are our proposed revenues for 2022-23. They are broken up into three categories of local revenue, state revenue, and federal revenue. And everyone has this document, and it's on our website. It's also in the chat, so I'm not going to recite and read everything. But you can see the components that make up our three levels of funding for local, state, and federal revenue. You'll see here, this is the breakout of our local revenue, and you'll see the major component here in our local revenue is our local taxes. And then you see right now, we have our local taxes at a flat rate currently. This is where we stand right now. There's marginal increases you'll see in transfer taxes and a slight reduction in PERTA tax, which is the public utility realty tax, which is the tax that is applied to some of the railroads and SEPTA land parcels and so forth. Next component of the proposed revenue is our state revenue. And you'll see here, we have a disclaimer at the bottom, or just a little justification, because as we stated early in this conversation, we have not heard anything from the state as far as what they're going to give us or what is going to be our allotments for next year. So we did a lot of assumptions. We did assumption for 3% for our BEF, which is our basic ed funding, which is the largest state subsidy that we receive. We assumed also that there would be $300,000 assumption for SEF, which is special ed funding, and this is based on what we received prior year as well. Last year, we also received a $800,000 level up adjustment. So our assumption out that we received if the same, if not more. The other area that came to light this year that was actually a plus for us is the property tax reduction. That was almost a $900,000 increase for us, as well as an increase in retirement subsidies. So you'll see an increase in retirement and Social Security, but both of those subsidies are primarily based upon personnel and what we pay them, their reimbursement off of salaries. The last area, which I touched on previously, was the federal revenue. And you'll see that's kind of a modest increase. We don't know what our new rates are for Title I, Title II, and Title III. So we're going to keep that constant at where we were this year. So I ran through the revenues. One thing we did this year also, we had a new budget process where we went through and we wanted to base a lot of our funding for the buildings upon student enrollment. So you'll see here what we did was we went through, we had a projected enrollment per building on the top row, and you'll see on the bottom box, you have the allocation of what was allocated per building based on student enrollment figures. And you'll see there's $140 base per student. There's also a allotment for students that are in special services programs and those who receive ELL services as well. And you'll see along the bottom bar there versus total allocation, that is what we allocated for each building based on student population and enrollment. Okay. Also part of our process we went through, we evaluated a school budget methodology, and you'll see here, this is the net effect of what we did. There are 6 positions that we were allocating this year because of what we went through based on student enrollment and what our methodology says. The methodology is there if anyone wants to go look at it. It's again, this is a lot of this information everyone's had before, and you can go through it at your leisure and read through it. So what we did also was each department composed of the cabinet members presented budgets of what they need for next year and what we need to make the actual program go forward. And you'll see here by the 7 categories or 7 areas here, they're broken out by personnel and non-personnel related items, gives you a total for each department. And on the bottom box there, you'll see we have a department total overall, and you see that's a $1.1 million increase over last year. And again, these are items that we're needed to progress the progress to move forward the progress we're making, to hit a lot of the things that were goals that are set by the strategic plan, and to make a better environment for our school. And that's what we're here for. That is our purpose. That is our goal. So just as we did revenues, this is the breakout of the expenditures. Again, they're broken out by instructional, support services, non-instructional, and debt service. These four categories, or these four buckets, are made up by the state. We follow the state accounting code. And you'll see here the total expenditure that we're looking at is $106 million. Included in here is the additional personnel for the methodology. The remaining difference of the increase is the $1.1 million of the department request that I showed you on the prior page. And again, this is the breakout here. This is the instructional. This follows the same course as with the revenues. It's going to be the instructional pages here. It'll show you the increase, which is a 1.9% increase overall. For support services, 1.76% increase. And support services exactly what it sounds. This is the area that support the educational and instructional process. Next area is going to be the non-instructional, which would be our student activities and community services. And the last bucket that we talked about was debt service. And as you see here, the debt service is an increase of 1.16%, which is roughly $681,000. And of that, a portion of that is related to our facilities master plan increase that we're looking forward in achieving next year. Okay, so we're on, and I'll go back to our first screen where we had our total revenues minus total expenditures results in a budget gap. Right now, we're still in the same space we were before. As I stated, there has been nothing new that's come out of Harrisburg that will explain or that will give us some answers of where we are with our revenues. So right now, the budget gap is approximately $1.2 million. Of that, $478 is related to the borrowing for the facilities master plan for next year. And the other remaining difference of $721,000 is due to the normal operational gaps that we have with salary increases and increases in services, our contracted services, and things of that nature. Okay. So our millage increase, where we were on May 12th, was a 2.75% increase over 21-22, which will result in a 28.95% millage assessment. And as you can see here, what we did was we broke out what the increase would look like. So for the facilities master plan, it would be a $39 increase. And this, I'm sorry, this is based on a house of an average assessment of $125,000. So for the facilities master plan, it would be a $39 increase. And this follows the average, what we had said all along, what our prediction would be for this year for the master plan. The other component was the operations. If you remember on the previous slide, it was $727 some odd dollars. So that increase would be approximately $58. So combined for a household, the increase for a house assessed at $100,000 would be $97. Now I'm going to pause here for a second because earlier in the presentation, I discussed how Homestead increased this year, which is a great thing for us. So of our 15,000 approximate folios or parcels that we have in the district, approximately 50% of the properties are enrolled in the Homestead Reduction program. So what does that mean? That means that of the 15,000 folios, 7,500 of those are going to have an increase in their property reduction of $111 from prior year. So if I have a house, I'm assessed at $125,000. If I'm enrolled in a program, I'm going to get a greater reduction of $111 versus a $97 increase. So in some areas, that's going to be a positive. In some areas, it may be a slight negative for some homeowners, depending on where they're at and what their house is assessed. But this shows a snapshot of where we are. This is where we were back on May 12th. This encompasses salary increases for our employees, contractual increases for our contractors, and so forth. So I'm going to pause there before I go to the next slide. I know I ran through a lot, but this is a recap. I think everyone has heard this before, and it's probably much discussion. So I'm going to pause there for a second. Are there any questions before I go to my next slide?
Yeah, Mr. Cuff, the new tax amount on the FMP, is that for total? That's not this year.
So we borrowed $10 million that was approved in March.
Right.
So that would be the increase as a result of that increase, the borrowing. There's an increase in our debt service. So that is tied to the debt service increase.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes, ma'am.
So I definitely thank you for explaining, everything that you did thus far. Just one thing, just want to put out there. It's not more so of a question. It's just a statement. So in Colwyn, I did talk to the residents and the council about the Homestead Act. I don't know, as from the board, what we can do with regard to continuing to educate our community on the Homestead Act. Like, I personally think that if we could have, coming from our budget meeting, or maybe Jen as our chair, talk to the councils to get them to understand how important the Homestead Act is and what it can do for us. The reason why I'm stressing this is because I spoke with several residents that said they had applied, but they did not get approved for it. So I think I did talk to you about this before, but I just want to put it out there in the open that maybe we can do something with be able to help in making sure that people are filling out their Homestead Act, whatever the information is, or grants that they have to fill out. I'm not sure what the paperwork looks like, but maybe we can do something as a board to help this, to show like, hey, we are raising taxes, but we're trying to figure out remedies to be able to help those in need. So I just wanted to put it out there and let you know I will be bringing it up again, but it's something that I think that we should be, we should push. Thank you.
Ms. Boykins, I'd love to talk to you about that offline.
Okay.
Our Lansdowne Democratic Committee goes through the records and looks for who has it and who doesn't. And it's a simple piece of paper coming from how people have to ask for it is sort of messed up. It should be given to everyone at closing. There should be no exceptions. I hope you're registered for a Homestead Act, Ms. Boykins. But anyone that would be turned down would not own not own their home, or it is their second home, that they have another home in another area that would be seen as their primary residence. But we can talk more, because that's really a grassroots door-to-door thing.
I tell people December, it could be November, but I tell them.
So just to follow up, Jennifer, on what you mentioned about the homestead. So typically what they do is they'll call into my office approximately November, December, because the cutoff is March 1st. And typically what happens is anyone that transfers property is part of your closing documents now currently to sign up for the homestead. And the only reason, and I can't imagine why someone would get turned down. The only reason someone would get turned down is supposed to be for homeowners, for if it's your primary residence. So if you own a property and you live in another municipality, you cannot qualify. If you own a property and you're renting out properties, only the property that you live in qualifies. So again, that determination is made by the county, not by us. But again, we typically tell folks to call up in November, late December, so we can send any paperwork in. And the cutoff for approval is March 1st of that next year.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I'm sorry. Go.
Sorry. Isn't there an income limit for homestead?
Nope.
I do not believe so.
No, there's not an income limit.
No, absolutely
I
not.
did find that out. But I like that, Jeff. Maybe like we can do, since March 1st, and Jen also, since we know application deadline is March 1st, maybe we can start in November to have a drive, you know, to get people and help them fill out their paperwork, or talk to boroughs to help push that in some way. I just think it will be a good look for us to do something in that way, just to get people to, you know that we are out here trying to make a remedy for this. And also in Colwyn and Darby, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are a high percentage of renters in those areas. So that's just something else we would have to take a look at as well, because maybe some landlords do not know that, you know, I don't know if it is their permanent residence or not, but it's something that I feel like we can press upon.
Right, so a landlord would not qualify.
Yes, unless, okay, so like if somebody lives in a duplex, they will qualify, because that could be the landlord, but they still in a
Correct,
duplex.
correct. In that scenario, you're right, correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yep, no problem. Good
Okay,
point.
thank you.
Okay, so
I have a question. When you were going over the anticipation, the funds from the state, what were those figures you said? Was it 3% increase from previous year for the BEF?
correct. So we anticipated a 3% increase. Again, the assumptions are based on what we received last year. So for BEF, it was a 3% increase. For SEF, it was $300,000, and for Level Up, it was $800,000.
Okay.
Okay, and again, those assumptions are based on what was received last year for the prior year.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll jump to the final slide. Again, everyone can read, everyone's able to read this, and I'll just touch on the highlights. So what we want to do is we wanted to discuss some of the items, because as we are nearing the end of the COVID funds, and the district has benefited from a lot of programs, a lot of things that we were able to do because of COVID. So as we draw to the end, we wanted to list out some of the things that as we go forward will no longer be supported through ESSER, and these will things, if we choose to go forward, will have to come through the operating budget going forward. So we compose this list here, and it's broken out by COVID specific items, as well as some of the operating items here. Again, I'm not going to read through these. You guys can read through this, but I want to provide this as information. So as we get through this process, these are items next year as we start building and getting ready for 23, 24. I know it sounds kind of foreign, it sounds kind of far off, but we had to keep these things in the back of our mind as we start going forward and prepare our budget for the future. Are there any questions? I mean, I'll give you some time to look through these, read through.
Yes, Jeff. So as first of all, thank you for this, because this is a really good that you have provided this information here, because I just remember certain meetings where everyone was like, well, if we don't get the COVID money, you know, what will happen? And this will show. So I'm glad that you're showing this to us, because this helps us as a board to kind of navigate what was extra, you know, from the ESSER funds. So thank you for providing this. Just a question, like with regard to the student Chromebooks. I just wanted to ask why that was on there. Because
no problem, good question. So we use a portions of the ESSER money to purchase Chromebooks. There's a component there that we were allowed to, so we tried to maximize that as much as possible. And that's what we did. And during the last couple of years, particularly this year coming up. So once this expires, then that becomes another part of operating budget that we have to build back in.
So the $290,000, that is for, is that like including a repair or the purchase of new ones?
This should be the purchase of new ones.
Okay. Okay.
So
just one.
And so I just want to remind board members, if you'll recall, when I started in the district, and prior to me starting, we as a district were unable to provide every student with a Chromebook. We provided, I believe, Chromebooks to a household which created significant challenges for students, especially if you had 2 or 3 students in a household who needed to utilize a computer. So it was because of the money that we received that we were able to purchase those Chromebooks. Had we not received that money, we would not have been able to purchase the Chromebooks. So as Jeff has said, those dollars will no longer be coming into the district. So I just wanted to
Okay.
remind people, because that's how it actually started.
No, and I do remember that, Dr. B. Coates. I guess, in my mind, I'm just kind of thinking forward of, okay, so does that mean school year 2022, starting in September, we won't have enough Chromebooks, or will there be a lack of, that's why I'm trying to figure out, I thought we were good on the Chromebooks, but thank you for pointing it out. I just want to know.
Yeah, no, we are good on the Chromebooks, because what we have been doing is utilizing the dollars that we have to first make sure every student has a Chromebook. Then we secondly made sure that we had Chromebooks in inventory. Thirdly, we then made sure that as we receive more dollars, we then projected out for the following years, roughly how many more Chromebooks we would need. But keep in mind, I believe it was maybe a month ago or 2 months ago where we shared, I think Mary gave an update on the use of Chromebooks, the replenishment rate that we have by school, because that then impacts what we have in inventory. So that's why it becomes very important for, as best as possible, families to take care of the resource that we're providing, because as they get damaged, lost, stolen, et cetera, that's an expense to the district that is ongoing. And Chromebooks do have a life. They're just like a textbook. I mean, it's not going to last forever. So, we also have to start looking at, okay, what's the replenishment cycle for that? And that's something that the technology department has worked on. So I would say to you that we are probably good for Chromebooks through the 23-24 school year, unless something significant happens in the 22-23 year where a larger percentage of Chromebooks are damaged, lost, or stolen.
Okay, so I know that we have put a policy in place and everything for the Chromebooks, and I do understand that. I just want to figure out what possibly we can do to kind of like protect ourselves, because 22-23, I don't want us to come to September and we don't have enough. I heard you on the 23-24, but I'm just hoping that we're ready, for the 22-23. And I also would like to see how many Chromebooks are come back damaged this year. I know I seen the Miss Agnew, I seen the information that she provided with regard to the return and percentage of each Chromebook, of each school and what we got back. But I would like to know how many are being coming back damaged, to just kind of give us a roundabout of what areas we need to focus on when it comes down to, sometimes if you may have a policy that may highlight some areas, but maybe it's certain areas we need to highlight on damage and things of that nature. How is it being damaged? That would help us, because within the policy, we'll be able to add more verbiage to the policy to help us around that. So I would like to see that information for the Chromebooks.
I've made a note of that, but I just want to reiterate, for the 22-23 school year, we are fine with Chromebooks. So it's nothing for board members to be concerned about this coming September. We will be fine with Chromebooks. I don't believe, from my experience, that what we have in a policy is really, or procedure is really going to help us replace the Chromebooks. I mean, we can go after people and ask them to pay for something, but the bottom line is, if families don't have the money to replace or repair a Chromebook, then, we're really going to be eating that cost. So outside of people taking care of the device, I'm not really sure. And I've talked to other people in other districts. Some districts are just realizing it as a loss, if that's the case, and they're projecting to replenish it just like you would a textbook.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. The last question I had was with regard to the Lakeside. So we know how important that company is to our school district. I guess you're going to have some type of, more information you can provide to us to figure out, what if we didn't have the Lakeside, what else we could do, in that case.
I've made a note of your statement. I'm not really sure what we would do with $1 million. And I will also say that, Lakeside, our experience has been that it works better in some levels than others. So
Okay.
if you recall, next year, we're not utilizing Lakeside at the elementary level, but we are utilizing Lakeside at the secondary level.
Okay.
I-
Thank
and-
you.
And I want to say that I appreciate this slide because we've known all along that ESSER funds were covering some super valuable things in our budget. Summer enrichment. It's been fabulous. Engaged a lot of students, but without funding like that, it will not exist at this level next year. And we will have to incur Chromebook expense in our budget because these funds will not be available going forward. No different than the ESSER funds we're using on our property projects to increase air handling.
Jennifer, I just want to correct one thing. We
Okay.
project money for summer enrichment for the summer of 2023.
Awesome.
So we do have the money for next year. So that's the similar practice we put into place, like for Chromebooks, trying to stretch the money as many years as we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Sure,
you for
no
the
problem.
correction.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you very much because I was concerned. That was going to be my next question. Thank you, Dr. Coates.
Okay, if there are no questions regarding the slide, we can have discussion. We had discussion all along. If there is further discussion we can have that now. I want to remind everyone that again, we're kind of in that stall pattern, waiting to hear from the state. Hopefully something shakes out, as Ms. Hoff had said. Hopefully things start to move quickly and more progressively to our advantage. Right now, we're scheduled to have our approval on the 27th of June. And so as we get more information, I will provide it out to the board and provide it out as quickly and as effectively as I get it and as I can. So any discussions?
Any other school board directors have any questions? Does anyone in the attendees have any questions?
Jen, no, not at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Ira. Miss Wright? You're on, Miss Wright.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Jeff, thank you for that slide that again showed what we are covered for up through the summer of 2023. I just noticed something on the previous slide that you showed. It pointed out that social and emotional services other than Lakeside was going to be able to be servicing the children during the summer. Did I understand that correctly?
I believe the summer enrichment is going to be covered up through August 23rd, which Dr. Bikos had just mentioned.
Right, I remember, I understand that, but it was a line in that slide that pointed out that social and emotional counseling would be given to students through the summer. Did I understand that part correctly?
I'm just reading through. I'm trying to catch up. I apologize.
Dr. Bicode, social emotional learning is a part of all our curriculums. I'm assuming it's in the summer program. Is that correct?
It should be, but I want to see what specifically is on the slide, just to
Thank
make
you.
sure that I'm answering the question correctly. So if
I'm
you
sorry.
go to that slide, that would be helpful.
Yep. I am.
Right, so that's really instructional, social, and emotional support. The summer programming is designed such that we're not only focusing on instruction, but we will also focus on social and emotional learning. So those are some of the dollars that went toward funding initiatives around social and emotional support. Some of those were fun activities where we partnered with different people in the community to come in and post activities in the afternoon with students, et cetera.
Okay, so if a student, I'm just thinking of a particular student in our community that I communicate with. That particular person was provided with counseling services as a high school student during the school year, and it appears to have been extremely helpful to her. I noticed that the enrichment programs are not for high school students, but just as a question, is there any kind of continuation of counseling services for high school students?
Well, obviously, we have counselors in the building, but
Mhm.
we did add another layer for last year, and for the upcoming year, we are utilizing Lakeside. So for the first bullet under COVID-specific items, Lakeside, those mental health services will no longer be provided after the 2022-23 school year, unless we include the expense of that in our normal operating budget.
Okay, so is she able to get counseling services summer 2022, or is it not for the high school level in that area also?
In the summer of 2022, depending upon the program that the student is participating in, support would be provided.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from our attendees? All right. Hearing nothing else. Thank you. Let's all include in our positive intentions that our state legislators decide on a budget sooner than later. Have a good evening.
Agreed.
Good night.
Be well, everyone.